Hey everybody. So we're going to talk prenatal development. I want to give an announcement first that I use these videos for both my online and my ground classes. So please be aware that sometimes and definitely in this PowerPoint you will see links to videos and articles and so forth. And next to them they'll either say online only or online and ground. And that means that you might want to pause the video if it says, for whichever one it says, online, ground, or both. And you might want to pause the video and actually look for the download for that, or the link to that in D2L on the PowerPoint or in D2L under content itself. And you can either do it as you watch, because it'll be embedded into the correct place for understanding, or you can do it at the end of the screencast when you're all done watching. And look back through the PowerPoint and do it then. So I just want to give you a heads up. For my ground class, if it doesn't say for you to watch it, then that means we'll probably be watching it in class. So just letting you know that. Anyway, so here we go. I'm going to put myself in the corner. Keep in mind that this is a story, the story of the development of a human being. We've done genetics where we understand that mom and dad's genes come together and they interact with one another to form a very unique and special individual, this third out of the two. And we talked more in genetics about how that happens. And now we're going to look at what actually goes on once, during this prenatal time while baby is baking. So here we go. We're designed to become addicted to our offspring. Evolutionarily, that's a very fortunate thing that we are driven biologically and neurologically to take care of our offspring, to love them, to care for them, to be attached to them in some way, so that, evolution theorists would say that, so that because we want the species to continue, that we're driven for that. Whatever the reason, it's very true. The mother-child bond assures infant survival in terms of protection, nutrition, and care. And this video, if you want to, halt and watch this, is just about that bond and how it's actually implanted in us biologically and neurologically, hormonally, like how that is. It's just a little bit of an introduction to that. So prenatal growth, we have 3 periods of prenatal growth. The germinal period, which is just the first 2 weeks or 14 days. The embryonic period, which is the end of that second week to the end of the second month. So there's still a lot more after that. These first 2 don't take up that much time, but they are so incredibly important to the development. And then the fetal period, which is the 9th week until birth. So let's look at these individually. First, this germinal period, those first 14 days, a lot actually happens. There's 3 major jobs that I want you to be aware of. When we, conception, conception is that egg and sperm joining in the fallopian tube. And so hopefully you all know how that happens. The egg and the sperm come together and the conception occurs, and it travels down the fallopian tube. And then, so we have these first 14 days. Now remember that doctors give due dates based not on conception date, because they can't really know that exactly, but on a woman's last period and her ovulation time accordingly. But we're talking, when we talk about timing here, we're talking about conception dates for the most part, assuming we knew them. So the 3 main jobs of this germinal period, this first 14 days: duplication and division of that single cell. So during conception, there's just the single cell, which is called the zygote. And about within 24 to 30 hours, it begins to divide. So it will actually make a copy of itself and divide, duplicate itself and divide, duplicate itself and divide over and over and over again. In 3 to 4 days, it has about 16 cells, and it's called a morula, and which means mulberry in Latin. And from day 6 to day 8 or 9, within that time period, a cavity begins to form within the morula. It's now called a blastocyst. Now the cavity, I need to fix this. The cavity is not called a blastocyst. The actual structure becomes no longer a zygote, no longer a morula. Now it's called a blastocyst. And it's the size of a pinhead. So I really want you to think about how tiny it is, but it has hundreds of cells within it with all of that DNA and all of those genes, all of those chromosomes. So It's very, very tiny. And we have over here on the right a kind of just an image of this. The cells inside the blastocyst right here, this inner cell mass or inner cluster of cells, those will go on to become the embryo and fetus, containing the head, body, all other structures of the developing human. Then we have fluid here, and then but the outer cells become the placenta. Now, inside this, the actual cells that are in this inner cell mass are what we call those embryonic stem cells. And those have the capacity to form, in the beginning, any type of the over 200 types of cells that make up the human body: an eye cell, brain cell, motor cell, toe cell, whatever, skin, organs, all of that. So they can become any one of those at this point. They don't have a job. Although getting a job is another one of the big jobs in this time period. So we know that this outer shell becomes the placenta. You can, if you're online, this should say online only. I'm going to pause here for just a second. I'll be right back. Okay, so if you are in an online class, then you can watch these. Go to the chapter 8 and 9 video and watch those. So another main job of this period is the differentiation. And what that means is that the cells do get jobs. They begin to become the types of cells, and this happens at in different time spans for different ones, but they become the type of cell they're meant to be. So they get their job and begin to migrate to the part of this cell mass that will be that part of the baby. So for that to happen, certain genes have to be turned on and off, depending on the type of tissue and cells they're meant to make. So, remember, they're all the same. They can become anything. So then some of the genes and some of the instructions have to be turned on or off so they make the correct kind of protein to make those specific, whether it be a neuron or a motor neuron or an eye cell or a skin cell or a liver cell, whatever it is that their job's going to be. So we have duplication and division and differentiation, the 3Ds, and then implantation. So within 6 to 10 days after conception, those outer cells will embed themselves in the lining of the uterus, where it can be nourished and protected. So it goes down, floats around, and then it embeds itself. And that has to happen for the pregnancy to become viable, for it to even happen and last, and the baby to grow. The implantation must occur. The embryo begins to produce a hormone called human chorionic gonadotropin, or HCG. It's a human growth hormone, and it's what's detected for pregnancy tests. This little video down here, all of you can watch online or ground if it works. It's kind of a weird link. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's okay if it doesn't. Don't worry about it. But it just kind of takes you through these steps. So that germinal period, this is interesting information. Up to 60% of conceptions do not grow or implant properly. So what that means is conception, that egg and sperm can come together and conceive with the intent of becoming a baby a whole lot more often than we know. Another reason to be careful, if we want to be careful. So the implantation has to occur. The body is very intelligent, and it knows if something's missing, if it's not right, if it's not going to work, and so it won't implant correctly. This right here, stress at the beginning of life. The human placenta, so those outer cells that form the placenta, contain 2 types of these enzymes, 11-beta hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase. I'm not always good at saying those. It's an exclusive enzyme that has been suggested to protect the fetus from high levels of maternal glucocorticoids. So what that means is the stress hormone cortisol converts to an inactive form of cortisone through this enzyme. This enzyme converts it from one to the other. And but the more stressed a mother becomes, the less of the enzyme there is, and more of the cortisol gets through the placenta to the developing baby. So this is just a little animation that shows that happening, and has a page on, you can read on that. So once we get through those first 2 weeks, we've done, remember, we have duplication, division, differentiation, and implantation. Once those things have complete, we've implanted and we're there, then the embryonic stage can start, that 3rd through 8th week, end of 2nd week, to the end of second month. My dog might start barking, so I may have to pause. Okay, so we're in the embryonic period, and the big job of this stage is that the major organs develop. We're implanted, we have our cells, and now all those major organs within us have to develop. So the first thing that can begin to happen is the thin line down the middle of the embryo, which is called the primitive streak, becomes what's called the neural tube at about 22 days. So right about that 3-week mark. I just like you to have an idea of how teeny this is. 3 millimeters, 0.118 inches, this little streak is, this neural tube is. And but it's going to grow into an entire brain containing 100 billion neurons and 60 trillion connections and the spinal cord. So the whole nervous system is going to come out of this. It's going to grow out of this. And it's that tiny. Again, okay. So here is just some stuff about that you can watch online. So the head's going to develop, all the eyes, ears, nose, mouth. The embryo grows from head to tail. Now, even think about a baby. Babies tend to be very sort of head heavy. They're not very proportional. And a lot of our very early development resources go to developing the brain. And so it grows exponentially, hugely in these time periods. And we tend to put all the energy into that first. So we grow from head to tail, basically, cephalocaudal pattern. We also grow proxima distal, which means from the inside out. So we grow the organs, all the things, we're growing all the kind of most important parts of us that we need to survive first, really. But by about the 5th week, the arm and leg buds emerge and limbs grow and proxima distal from the inside the body to the outside. If any of you have ever had Carolyn Elliott, if you're online, maybe not, but she's an English teacher at the Westminster Front Range campus, and she's very open about this, but she does not have fully formed hands. She can pick things up, but her hands are not her fingers are not formed. She has prosthetic legs. And when her mother was in her about 5th week, which is when buds form and these things, begin to form, she was exposed to rubella, which is the only thing the doctors could think of that might have caused this particular problem. If it had been an exposure before or after, there might have been different problems, or maybe none at all. So this is what they think happened, and this shows us how, these first beginning periods, this embryonic stage, is so vital to the development of these things. And if something gets in the way in these periods at very distinct times, it can cause damage to the development. So vulnerability, about 20% of embryos miscarry, mostly due to chromosomal abnormalities. So again, the body is intelligent and it knows if things aren't going to survive well, and sometimes cannot continue. So, I'm sorry here. By the 8th week, we have all of our body parts except the sex organs not fully formed and developed yet, but which will be the next thing to happen. So all the major organs develop. We begin to get the buds. We begin to grow into an actual look like a human being during this embryonic stage. And then we move into the fetal period and we become a fetus from the 9th week to birth. So week about 9 through 12, the SRY gene on the Y chromosome kicks in and triggers the development of male sexual organs. So until then, yes, we have genetically, we're either XX or XY, but until this SRY gene kicks in, males won't get male sex organs. So we all kind of start out as females. And, there can be problems if something goes wrong in this happening. This is an article right here. The male also experiences a rush of testosterone, and this is just an article about a study that shows different levels of testosterone in fetuses, how that can show up later in boys in later years. So I suggest reading that. It's pretty interesting. So in the beginning, we're all girls. This is actually a very short, very cute. I think you'll actually enjoy this video. I would suggest everybody watching it, talking about how that SRY gene kicks in and what that looks like. So in that 3rd month, this is just a 3-3-3 idea. In the 3rd month, 3 ounces, 3 inches long. A norm, an average, not everybody's going to grow at the same rates, even in, when we're in the womb. But it's just to give you an idea or an average. The 4th through 6th month. So, okay, keep in mind, remember, the germinal period was all about duplication and division, differentiation, implantation, all those things that genetically have to occur and then physiologically to occur to even begin. The embryonic stage was about all of the organs and all the pieces and parts growing or developing, actually becoming. And now the fetal period is very much about all the filling in, the maturing of, the growing stronger of, the movements that will begin to happen to grow the motor capacities and the weight gain that occurs and all the systems getting stronger and filling in. So heartbeat becomes stronger, cardio system becomes more active, brain increases about 6 times in size this 4th through 6th month. So we're going to talk more about the brain in just a second. Stress in the fetus. This is interesting. There was a study that found pregnancy anxiety at 19 weeks gestation was associated with gray matter. So that's neurons in the brain, volume reductions in the prefrontal cortex, the premotor cortex, the medial temporal lobe, the lateral temporal cortex, the postcentral gyrus, as well as the cerebellum, extending to the middle occipital gyrus and the fusiform gyrus. And I was like, what? What is all of that? These are very much portions of the brain involved in like planning, thinking, the prefrontal cortex, decision making, in movement, in balance, memory, lots of memory areas of the brain, and our higher order thinking and our movement areas. Fusiform gyrus will talk a little bit about, but that so these areas caused, so stress at the 19-week gestation period was shown to cause sort of delayed fetal maturation, disrupted emotional regulation, and impaired cognitive performance during infancy, and decreased brain volume in areas associated with learning and memory in 6 to 8-year-old children. So, and they actually found it was really at this early gestation period, like 25 weeks, it didn't have, there wasn't as much. So just finding that these early periods are very important, that stress can impact how children respond to stress, regulate themselves emotionally, their memory function, all of these. This is just something that shows decreased affective responses, emotional responses to stress, altered memory function, increased risk for postpartum depression of the mother. So just studies being done a lot on, stress and how it impacts children. So, and we'll talk more about that. Because it sounds like, well, mothers never get stressed. Well, that's just not even possible or realistic or anything like that. It's not about that. It's about the support of the mother during these times and her finding ways to support herself and to manage stress better, and to care for herself and be compassionate in these periods. So the fetal brain, neurogenesis and synaptogenesis. So I'm going to hide myself here. Neuron production in human beings on about day 42 begins on about day 42 after conception. Neurons form from neural progenitor cells. Progenitor cells. Very good at some of those words. So about 6 weeks after conception, we start to see neurons actually begin to form, and an excess of them are formed prenatally. So approximately 250,000 new cells a minute created mid-pregnancy. So that's when this fetal period is. So the first neuron is building 6 weeks after conception, and by mid-pregnancy we're looking at 250,000 new cells a minute. That's a lot. The fetal brain reaches almost 1 trillion neurons, but it's pruned to about 100 billion in a child. So we actually lose neurons. We have fewer than we do prenatally. Neurons migrate to different brain areas where they start connecting with other neurons. This is called synaptogenesis, creating early neural networks. And all the major pathways are completed by birth. So neurons begin to form, and then they move into different parts of the brain, just like anything else. They have to migrate to the part, if they're going to be in the hippocampus, or if they're going to be in the amygdala, if they're going to be in the prefrontal cortex, they have to go to the kind of appropriate area for them to get their job within the brain. And then they begin to make circuits in the brain. They begin to fire and wire together in order to work together. Because the brain is so incredibly, it's what we need for everything within our bodies and our minds to work. So all these neurals, these little neural networks have to begin, and all the major pathways have to start happening in order for the baby to be able to prepare to live outside the womb, for all the major organs to work, for everything, the senses to go online, for everything to begin to work. During the early postnatal period, level of connectivity, and that's that synapses, the connections between neurons throughout the developing brain far exceeds that of adults. Connections are gradually pruned based on experiences of the child. So we start out with a whole bunch, and then we actually lose them based on the experiences we will have outside of the womb. And we'll talk more about pruning as we go. I'm sorry, I just sort of went. All right, so the age of viability is the age at which a preterm newborn may survive outside the womb with medical care. It's about 22 weeks, but that's still really little, and it's still really not ready. The brain is key. So we just talked about all that, the neurogenesis, the synaptogenesis, all of that has to be happening and online for anything within the body to run effectively, appropriately, and to run at all. So the brain is key to the age of viability. Chances of survival increase with each day after the 22-week mark. Born in the 7th month requires intensive hospital care and life support systems. Differences between preterm and newborn is the maturation of neurological, respiratory, cardiovascular systems. So if babies are born early, they just have not received enough all the time as one who goes to the end in terms of gaining strength and gaining development and maturing all of these systems within the body, which is what this fetal period is all about. Lungs expand and contract, the heart matures, they gain at least 4.5 pounds, and the brain continues to grow. So, we look at this and we realize this fetal period is all about this maturation, this gaining of strength in order to survive. So I'm going to end this one here, and we will have another chapter, we will have another prenatal chapter screencast, but I'm going to stop this here because we've gone through all of the 3 stages.